Chapter 14 Mr. Willy Wonka. Mr. Wonka was standing all alone just inside the open gates of the factory, and what an extraordinary little man he was. He had a black top on his head. He wore a tailcoat made of a beautiful plum-covered velvet. His trousers were bottle green. His gloves were pearl gray, and in one hand he carried a fine gold-topped walking cane. Covering his chin there was a small, neat, pointed black beard, a goatee. And his eyes were most marvelously bright. They seemed to be sparkling and twinkling at you all the time. The face, in fact, was alight with fun and laughter. And oh, how clever he looked! How quick and sharp and full of life! He kept making quick, jerky little movements with his head, cocking it in this way and that, and taking everything in with those bright, twinkling eyes. He was like a squirrel in the quickness of his movements, like a clever old squirrel from the park. Suddenly he did a funny little skipping dance in the snow. He spread his arms wide, and he smiled at the 5 children who were clustered near the gates and called out, "Welcome, my little friends! Welcome to the factory!" His voice was high and fluty. "Will you please come forward one at a time?" he called out. "And bring your parents. Then show me your golden ticket and give me your name. Who's first?" The big fat boy stepped up. "I'm Augustus Gloop," he said. "Augustus!" cried Mr. Wonka, seizing his hand. "My dear boy, how good to see you! Delighted, charmed, overjoyed to have you with us. Are these your parents? How nice! Come in, come in. That's right. Step right through the gates." Mr. Wonka was clearly just as excited as everybody else. "My name," said the next child, "is Veruca Salt." "My dear Veruca, how do you do? What a pleasure this is. You do have an interesting name, don't you? I always thought Veruca was sort of a wart that you got on the sole of your foot. But I must be wrong, mustn't I? How pretty you look in that lovely mink coat. I'm so glad you could come. Dear me, this is going to be such an exciting day. I do hope you enjoy it. I'm sure you will." "I know you will. Your father, are you Mr. Salt and Mrs. Salt? Overjoyed to see you. Yes, this ticket is quite in order. Please go in." The next 2 children, Violet Beauregard and Mike TV, came forward to have their tickets examined and then have their arms practically pumped off the shoulders by energetic Mr. Wonka. And the last of the small, nervous voice whispered, "Charlie." "Charlie," cried Mr. Wonka. "Well, well, well, so there you are. You're the one who found your ticket only yesterday. Yes, I read all about it this morning paper. Just in time, my dear boy. I'm so glad. I'm so happy for you. And this, your grandfather, delighted to meet you, sir, overjoyed, enraptured, enchanted. All right, everybody, let's 5 children. Good. Now follow me. Our tour is about to begin. Please do keep together. Please don't wander off by yourselves. I shouldn't like to lose any of you this stage of my proceedings. Oh, dear me, no." And this is a picture of Mr. Wonka greeting one of the children. Charlie glanced over his shoulder and saw the great iron entrance gates closing behind him. The crowds outside were pushing and shouting. Charlie took a last look at them, then the gates closed with a clang, and out of sight, the outside world disappeared. "Here we are," cried Mr. Wonka, trotting along in front of the group. "Through the big red door, please. That's right. It's nice and warm inside. I have to keep it warm inside my factory because of my workers. My workers are used to an extremely hot climate. They can't stand the cold. They'd perish if they went outdoors in the sweater. They'd freeze to death." "But who are those workers?" asked Augustus Gloop. "All in good time, dear boy," said Mr. Wonka, smiling at Augustus. "Be patient. You shall see everything as we go along. Are you all inside? Good. Would you mind closing the door? Thank you." Charlie Bucket found himself standing in a long corridor that stretched away from him as far as he could see. The corridor was so wide that the car could have easily been driven along it. The walls were pale pink. The lighting was soft and pleasant. "How lovely and warm," whispered Charlie. "I know. What a marvelous scent," answered Grandpa Joe, taking a long, deep sniff. All the wonderful smells in the world seemed to be mixing in the air around them. The smell of roasting coffee and burnt sugar and melting chocolate and mint and violets and crushed hazelnuts and apple blossom and caramel and lemon peel. And far away in the distance, from the heart of the great factory, came a muffled roar of energy as some monstrous gigantic machine was spinning on its wheels at breakneck speed. "Now this, my dear children," said Mr. Wonka, raising his voice, "this is the main corridor. Will you please hang your coats and hats on those pegs over there, and then follow me? That's the way. Good. Everyone ready? Come on then. Here we go." He trotted off at his colored down the corridor with the tails of his plum-colored velvet coat flapping behind him, and the visitors all hurried after him. It was quite a large party of people when you came to think of it. There was 9 grown-ups, 5 children, 14 in all. So you could imagine that they were in a good deal of pushing and shoving as they hustled and bustled down the passage. "Come on," cried Mr. Wonka. "Get up, move on, please. We'll never get around today if you dawdle like this." So he turned right off the main corridor into the slightly narrow passage. Then he turned left again, then right, then left, then right, then right, then left, then right again. The place was like a gigantic rabbit warren, with passages leading this way and that way in every direction. "Don't let go of my hand," said Grandpa Joe. "Notice how all these passages are sloping downwards. Now we're going underground," called Mr. Wonka. "We're going to go to the most important rooms in my factory, are all deep below the surface." "Why is that?" somebody asked. "There won't be nearly enough space for them on top," said Mr. Wonka. "These rooms are going to be enormous. They're larger than football fields." No building in the world would be big enough to house them. But down here underneath the ground, I've got all the space I want. There's no limit as long as I hollow it all out. Mr. Wonka turned right, and then left again, and then right again. The passages were slipping steeper and steeper downhill now. Then suddenly Mr. Wonka stopped. In front of him there was a shiny metal door. The party crowded around. On the door in large letters it said, "The Chocolate Room." Chapter 15, The Chocolate Room. An important room this is, said Mr. Wonka, taking a bunch of keys from his pocket and slipping one into the keyhole in the door. This is the nerve center of the whole factory, the heart of the whole business. It's so beautiful. I insist upon my rooms being beautiful. I can't abide ugliness in factories. In we go then. Do be careful, my dear children. Don't lose your heads. Don't get overexcited. Keep very calm. Mr. Wonka opened the door. 5 children and 9 grown-ups pushed their way in, and oh, what amazing sight that met their eyes. They were looking down upon a lovely valley. There were green meadows on either side of the valley. Along the bottom of it flowed a great brown river. What was more tremendous was a tremendous waterfall halfway along the river, a steep cliff over which water curled and rolled in a solid sheet and then crashed away into a boiling, churning whirlpool of froth and spray. Below the waterfall, and this is the most astonishing sight of us all, was a whole mass of enormous glass pipes that were dangling down the river from somewhere high up in the ceiling. They really were enormous, those pipes. There must have been a dozen of them at least. They were sucking up the brownish, muddy water from the river and carrying it away to goodness knows where. And because they were made of glass, you could see the liquid flowing and bubbling alongside them. And above the noise of the waterfall, you could hear a never-ending sucking sound of pipes as they did their work. And those are the beautiful pipes. Graceful trees and bushes were growing along the riverbanks, weeping willows, alders, and tall clumps of rhododendrons with their pink and red and mauve blossoms. In the meadow there was thousands of buttercups. There, cried Mr. Wonka, dancing up and down, pointing at his gold chain on the great brown river. It's all chocolate. Every drop of the river is hot, melted chocolate in its finest quality. The very finest quality. There's enough chocolate in there to fill every bathtub in this entire country, and all the swimming pools as well. Isn't it terrific? And just look at my pipes. They suck up all the chocolate and carry it away to other rooms in the factory where it is needed. Thousands of gallons an hour, my dear children, thousands and thousands of gallons. The children and the parents were too flabbergasted to speak. They were staggered. They were dumbfounded. They were bewildered and dazzled. They were completely bowled over the hugeness of the whole thing, and they simply stood and stared. The waterfall is the most important, Mr. Wonka went on. It mixes the chocolate, it churns it up, it pounds it, and it beats it. It makes it light and frothy. No other factory in the world mixes chocolate by waterfall, but it's the only way to do it properly, the only way. And do you like my trees and my lovely bushes? Don't you think they look pretty? I told you I hated ugliness, and of course they are all eatable. All are made of something different and delicious. And do you like my meadows? Do you like my grass, my buttercups? The grass you're sitting on now, dear ones, is made of a soft, minty sugar that I just invented. It's called sludge. Try it, Blade. Please do. Automatically, everybody bent down and picked up one blade of grass. Everybody, that is, except for Augustus Gloop and Violet Beauregarde. Before tasting her blade of grass, she took a piece of the world record chewing gum out of her ear and stuck it behind her ear. Isn't it wonderful? Whispered Charlie. Hasn't it got a wonderful taste? Grandpa, I could eat a whole field, said Grandpa Joe, grinning with delight. I could go around on all fours like a cow and eat every blade of glass. Try a buttercup, cried Mr. Wonka. They're even nicer. Suddenly, the air was filled with screams of excitement. The screams came from Veruca Salt. She was pointing frantically to the other side of the river. Look over there. What is that? He's moving. He's walking. It's a little person. It's a little man down there by the waterfall. Everybody stopped picking up buttercups and stared across the river. She's right, said Charlie. It is a little man. Can you see him? I can see him, said Grandpa Joe excitedly, and now everybody started shouting at once. There's 2 of them. My gosh, so there is. There's even more than that. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What are they doing? Where did they come from? That's what they see. Who are they? Children and parents alike rushed down to the edge of the river to get a closer look. Aren't they fantastic? No higher than my knee. Look at their funny long hair. The tiny men, who were no larger than medium-sized dolls, had stopped what they were doing and were staring back at the visitors. One of them pointed at the children, and the other whispered something, and then all 5 of them burst into laughter. But they can't be real people, said Charlie. Of course they're real people, said Mr. Wonka. They're Oompa Loompas.